two friends taking pictures of the rising full moon on a summer night.
Two teenage kids doing what teenage kids do.
When a stranger with a gun and a death wish changed everything.
It was violent, it was senseless, and I will never understand it, I will never accept it.
I'm Amy Donaldson, and unfortunately, we're all too familiar with stories about how violence shatters lives. But what we rarely see is how they are rebuilt. In a new podcast, The Letter, we relive tragedy, but only so we can hear the rest of the story. The struggle to reclaim lives, the realities of grief, and the possibilities of forgiveness.
I believe in miracles. Sometimes I thought, there are no miracles. Yeah, there are, and this is a big one.
Follow The Letter at theletterpodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, welcome to Project Recovery, a podcast about addiction, but more importantly, it's a podcast about recovery. I'm Casey Scott, that's Dr. Matt. We're going to hear from Sidnee in just a bit. She's with LifeLine. Talk about how if your kids are showing signs of addiction or needing some help, a place that they can go to get some guidance, and that's what it's all about. But before we get to that, we always like to check in with Dr. Matt, see what's going on. Today's kind of a spooky day because we're recording this on Halloween.
That's right.
And so what was your best Halloween costume ever, Dr. Matt?
Oh, my best one ever? I think I had a really good Frankenstein when I was around 10, 11. But I was Batman 3 years in a row, so I don't know. It's a balance between Batman and Frankenstein.
Give me your Frankenstein sound.
Oh. How's that?
Not good.
Not good.
Not good at all.
He doesn't say anything.
I don't think.
Which one? Young Frankenstein? That's different than the.
Yeah. I love that.
That was my Young Frankenstein.
So I had a couple cool things happen to me last week.
Yeah.
Okay. One is I DJ'd my daughter's Halloween dance.
Oh, right.
This is at the junior high.
Junior high dance.
And I didn't have an incident like I did when I DJ'd the high school.
This was better.
Yeah, I was a little more savvy. The content was appropriate.
Okay, good.
And this is the deal I made with my daughter. I said, are you going to go to the dance? And she goes, no, Dad, I don't know if I'm going to go. And I go, you've got to go to the dance. Your dad's the DJ. If you don't go, what is that telling everybody about the DJ?
Yeah.
And so I said, she goes, I'm not going to go.
He's embarrassing. That's what it's telling everybody.
It's funny you say the word embarrassing because this is what I told her. I said, honey, if you show up, you can hang out for 15 minutes, and if you want to leave, go ahead and leave. But if you don't show up, I'm going to spend 2 hours embarrassing you the whole time. So it's up to
blackmail.
you. Do whatever you got to do.
Classic parenting move.
So I said, just get some of your friends. So our friends showed up, and they were behind the DJ table. And I said, here, I'll give you a job. Take requests.
Okay.
You know, give you something to do. So these right here are all the songs the kids were requesting.
Oh, wow.
And this is
Boyfriend by Justin Bieber,
which is I thought was a cool one,
right at the top.
But these kids dance to 80s music like we used to dance
Thriller.
to 70s. Yeah,
they got Thriller on
it
here.
was pretty cool. And the other thing, real quick,
Tom Sawyer by Rush.
Yeah,
why wasn't I invited?
That kid came as Geddy Lee.
Really?
Yes, and I was like, that is awesome.
That's my long lost son.
Oh man, he was cool. And I was like, do you even know who it is? And he was like, yeah, me and my dad jam to it all the time.
I love that kid.
That kid was cool.
That's cool.
So it was a lot of fun. And what it brings me back to is that a year ago, I was just getting out of Pinnacle Recovery. That's where I got on my road to recovery. If you know somebody who needs some help, have them do what I did and give Pinnacle a call. But a year ago, I was looking at my life and going, I don't know where I'm going to be. But this year, I'm DJing my daughter's dance.
Yeah.
I went to the parade, and within a year, some amazing, magical stuff has happened. And I just want to let people know that that's proof that recovery is possible. And if you just keep putting one foot in front of the other, who knows what can happen?
Well, I mean, a year ago, I was worried about you. You were MIA because you were off into your program. We knew you were safe, but worried about, who knows where things could be. And I think the reason that you were able to have so much fun with your daughter. By the way, did she stay after?
Yeah, she stayed the
whole time.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
That's testament to your relationship with her, but more importantly, that relationship is strong today because you're sober and in recovery. So, I mean, that's a perfect example of why we're trying to get this message out.
And I say it all the time. I hate it when people are right, but people are right.
Yeah.
Good things do start to happen. And I'm not going to lie to you and say that everything's been great because there's been some really bad moments. But for the most part, when I look back over this past year, there's been really cool things happening, and I'm excited for the future. And I'm excited for this podcast and to keep the conversation going. And that's what this is all about, is letting people come in and share their stories.
We've had such a great participation from people in the community, people in recovery, professional people, family members. It's been really great.
That's why I'm really excited that Sidnee said she'd come in and talk today. Now, we've been trying to get her on for a while.
You could have got a better costume going, though, today.
What do you mean?
Well, your Justin Bieber costume, I mean...
Really? That's what you're going to go with? Yeah, come on. You can't be happy
Josh
with that
just
one.
booed me.
Yeah, you can't be happy with that one. But let's get to Sidnee. Now, Sidnee's with LifeLine, and we're going to find out more about LifeLine. But you've got an interesting kind of story of how LifeLine came into your life. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, so I actually went through the program 16 years ago. When I went into the program, it was on Halloween.
Oh,
16
really?
years ago.
Wow,
Yeah,
so this
interesting
is an
enough.
anniversary, huh?
Yes.
Wow, that's kind of cool.
How old were you at the time?
I was 15.
So 15 years old.
Yes.
On Halloween, you entered LifeLine.
Yes.
What led up to that?
Well, it's kind of hard for me to talk about because I haven't talked about it in detail for a long time, but I was very lost before that. I remember being really, really, really depressed. I had a little bit of bullying in middle school that kind of got me pushed out of the group of friends that I was friends with growing up to a new group of friends.
I'm going to stop you there real quick, because I think for a lot of us as parents, and when you get away from that, you have a different outlook on it. You go, hey, look, to be honest with you, I'm not sure these kids are going to be your friends the rest of your life, and I know this is a big deal to you, but in the big scheme of things, it's really not that big a deal. But to those kids getting pushed out of your group of friends, that's why when I got divorced, I didn't want to move my kids out of the school, because that is a big deal to them, and that is their world.
Yeah, it was pretty traumatic. I mean, in the moment, I just remember being really sad about it. And one of the girls was my very best friend since 4th grade. And so it was really, really hard for me to lose her. And I got in a group of other friends that probably weren't the greatest influences. And that's kind of when I started to go downhill. Started partying a lot, sloughing school. I remember just really resenting my parents, and they were wonderful parents growing up. They didn't, they did the best they could. And I just lost my connection with everyone in my family.
And this is when you're 13 and 14. These are very formidable ages, right?
Yeah, that's why middle school, junior high age is so important but challenging, is because our sense of self really is starting to gel seriously at that time. And so if you mix into that rejection from peers, that can really take a toll, because kids, and you're still a kid at that age, are what we call egocentric, meaning that they see the world first from their own viewpoint, including blame. So it's really hard. You might be angry at friends who pick on you or bully you, but a lot of the times it comes down to the kid starts to feel like, well, what's wrong with me? Instead of a parent's point of view, like you were pointing out, Casey, is more like, oh, those are the kids, it's the group dynamic. But the child, him or herself, feels like, if I was just cooler, smarter, funnier, prettier, whatever, I'd be in the group.
And so let me ask you this. Before you got checked into LifeLine on Halloween, you said your parents were great parents, and they did the best that they could do. What kind of intervention or talks did they have with you prior to taking you to LifeLine?
They tried outpatient counseling with me. They tried sending me to live with my aunt down in Utah County for a while. I mean, they tried everything I think they could, and they were to their breaking point, to the point where they felt like they needed to reach out to something a little bit more extreme, I guess.
Do you remember at what age or under what circumstances they first realized that you were struggling more than usual?
Yeah, I think it was my first suicide attempt. I think I was probably when I was 15, just turning 15.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I was very upset at my parents one day. I can't remember what I did that I got in trouble, but I did get in trouble. And I got grounded, and I had plans to go to a dance and with a bunch of my friends, and they told me I couldn't go anymore, and I was grounded, and I was super upset because I felt like my friends were my life. Like, I didn't care about my family anymore. And at that point, I just felt like I would rather end my life than be around my family.
And then your family found out about it, or found you, and they said, we don't know what to do. We need help.
Yeah, so I ended up going to uni for their inpatient for about, I think, like a week.
What was your experience like at uni? I mean, I know when I was 44 and in uni, I mean, this was a whole new world to me. I can't imagine being 15, everything going through your head, and then up in there. Were you up there with adults?
No, I was with other kids, but in like going back to like that girl at that time, I remember not realizing how serious it was. Like I didn't take it serious that like, and now being in this industry and being in admissions at LifeLine, I realize what inpatient at a hospital like uni means. But it was interesting. It's obviously
What
a lot
does it
different.
mean? For the listeners, that might be interesting. Like
Yeah.
to you, how serious is it if you're a 15-year-old who's being admitted to an inpatient psychiatric hospital for a week? That doesn't happen just because you have a bad attitude, right?
Right. No. To me, it means, that it's gotten to the extreme where like they have to have 24-hour nursing doctors if they are being watched 24/7, keeping them safe, basically.
Yeah. It's pretty much a safety issue.
Mm-hmm.
People realizing that this person, in this case, a teenager, can't be safe outside of 24-hour care. And so your suicide attempt must have been serious enough, not just for your parents to worry, but the doctors as well.
Yes. Yeah. I think they, at that point, had a little self-harming. I was obviously very depressed. I remember one time my mom dropped me off at high school. This is right before I went into LifeLine, but it's one of the memories I hate the most. But I might get a little emotional, but I remember my mom said, "I love you so much. Like, please be safe. Please go to class today. Like, I'll pick you up." And I just looked at her dead in the eyes. And like, I just remember being like so dark. That's kind of what I would describe myself as. But I told her, "I fucking hate you." That's what I said. And I just remember her starting to cry. And I got out and slammed the door. And I didn't go to class. I remember going to ditch. And I'm not sure what I did. But yeah, I think that was a little bit before my parents placed me.
And that's a real reflection of how dark and upset you were feeling.
Yeah.
And how long had your depression been going, do you think? I think if your parents kind of came into understanding it at that age, it sounds like it had been going for quite a while.
I think it had been going since I was like 13, 14 years old.
Yeah.
But I think it got really bad towards end of middle school. And between that and going into being a sophomore at high school was when it got the worst.
Do you know if any of your family members, like your parents, grandparents, struggled with depression?
Yes. A lot of people in my family have had anxiety and depression and other mental illnesses.
And you got emotional, and I appreciate you being willing to be authentic and tell your story. Why is that so emotional for you now, thinking about that interaction with your mom?
Because my mom's like the most incredible person ever. She's always been so sweet and done like everything for me and my sisters. So, and like I'm really close to her. She's one of my best friends now, and so it's like really hard to remember like treating my parents that way. Yeah.
So there you are in uni. You're there for 7 days, and did you know on the 7th day that they were going to put you in LifeLine?
No, I actually didn't go straight from uni. I think that they still were kind of a little bit in their lost stage. I feel like a lot of parents, I think if I hadn't gone through this and been in this industry, I wouldn't have known where to turn. I think a lot of people don't know where to turn for their kids and where they should go.
What's your birth order in your family?
I'm the oldest.
So this was your parents' first.
It was,
and they go around.
After LifeLine, they learned a lot of good parenting skills for my other sisters and parented very differently, I think.
And we're going to find out more about LifeLine in the second part of this podcast, because LifeLine really has so many programs that are designed to help the families. And that's what I really wanted to talk about on this podcast. But one thing I wanted to go back to is that, in addiction, there's, we hear it all the time where somebody goes, "I can't believe that happened to him. They come from such great family," or stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But parents, they don't know what to do, because, I'm taking my kid to LifeLine. And I think if we can flip the dialogue and make it sound like, no, I'm taking my kid to LifeLine because they're going to give them the help that they need, that I can't give them. And as parents having to go, "I can't help. I don't know what to do." It's almost like an addict not admitting that they are an addict. Does that make sense?
Oh, sure. Yeah. It's an interesting thing. We for almost everything else that we do in life that's important, we admit that we need some help and training to be good at it, whether it's, the profession that you choose or a hobby that you choose. Parenting, for some reason, since it's such a natural thing when people get married, they have kids and whatnot, that I think a lot of times we go into it with this false assumption that we should just figure it out and it'll all work out without professional help. And the reality is anybody who has kids knows that every stage your oldest child goes through is a brand new learning experience for you too. And I think part of your, emotion and kind of heartbreak over that interaction with your mom when you were 15 is because you're looking back on it now, having empathy and realizing she was really using the tools she had. She was showing a lot of love and encouragement and those sort of parental tools that come naturally to so many moms and parents, but it wasn't sufficient, and that wasn't her fault.
Mm-hmm. The only way parenting can become more difficult is if IKEA gave you directions.
Yeah, that's right.
You know what I mean? You go
we got Swedish directions,
yeah, I was
right?
like, whoa, because there is
a little Allen wrench.
Yeah, there are extra parts.
Right.
There's always extra parts.
I know.
But parenting is tough, and we haven't been able to tackle this on a minor age, 18 and under. In Pinnacle Recovery, it's 18 and up. And I think a lot of the recovery centers are out there, and LifeLine does it. And I think, are you thankful that you got to go to LifeLine?
Yes, or I wouldn't work there. It was a wonderful experience.
So you said right when you got out of uni, where did your parents take you?
They just took me home. I think they were still lost on where I should be going, but I think at that time is when they started touring places. And I remember my dad saying that when he walked in there, he just got a really good, instant, relieving, good feeling about the place and the people he met and talked with there. And they just kind of knew. They just knew when they walked in that was the place for them.
And I had that same feeling when I walked into Pinnacle. I felt like, okay, this is going to be okay. I think I need to be here. And when I switched my perspective, instead of having to be here to getting to be here, that's when it really clicked.
But that's hard for a teenager to do. Yeah. How hard was that? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I didn't have the same feeling as you, Casey. I was very upset. It was really hard. I think, when you get there, you're really angry at your parents. I remember being so angry at my parents and thinking that they were crazy for wanting to put me here and I don't need to be here because there's other kids that had, maybe harder substance abuse issues
or
worse
problems.
Higher mental health. They'd come from really bad families, hard families. And I was like, why am I here? But I remember the first time you get to see your family at family night, which is a week to 2 weeks after you go into the program. I just remember seeing my parents and just instantly bawling, just so excited, and I had missed them so much. So you gain a little bit perspective and empathy pretty quickly when you lose everything that you had. All your privileges, you don't get to see your family every day.
And for parents that are listening, back to the parents' point of view, the fact that you burst into tears and were so excited to see them, what that tells me is your parents did the right things to create a strong attachment, is the term we use in psychology. And so despite the anger that you had, despite the depression and the conflict at home that was probably coming up all over the place in the years prior to that, that's who you wanted to be with. That's where you felt safe. You were excited to see them. And so your parents obviously did do the right things to create a healthy attachment.
Were you the only one crying?
No, everyone was crying.
Yeah, everybody cries.
Yeah. But that's my thing is that, you're in there for the first 2 weeks and you're mad at them and all that stuff. But this is not easy on the parents either.
Right.
Well, I haven't worked at a place like LifeLine, but I've worked in the day treatment programs and at the hospital at uni, which for the listeners is the University of Utah's Neuropsychiatric Institute, a freestanding mental health hospital for all ages. And 90% of the time, maybe more than 90% of the time, you see that. But you do see the families where there is a lack of attachment sometimes, and there's a lot of anger. And sometimes that can be worked through in those programs so that eventually the good tears and the emotions flow.
I'm Dave Cawley, investigative journalist and host of the podcast Cold. Don't miss Cold's new Season 3, where I look into the unsolved disappearance of Cherie Warren, a woman last seen leaving her job at a Salt Lake City office in 1985. Police cast suspicion on Cherie's estranged husband and boyfriend, but never made any arrests or recovered Cherie's remains. Find Cold Season 3, The Search for Cherie, anywhere you get your podcasts.
So you guys have that first meeting. What is a day in a life of LifeLine?
Well, back then it was a little different than it is now. We've definitely changed our programming over the years with research and things like that. But in the day in the life when I was there, I mean, we still do this, but you do school first. So we have teachers that teach on site, did school, and then the rest of the day you're in clinical groups. You meet with your therapist once a week. You do a family session once a week.
So for those who don't know, maybe we should tell everybody, what is LifeLine?
Oh, yeah. So LifeLine is a residential treatment center. We also do day treatment and intensive outpatient in North Salt Lake. So we work with kids that struggle with mental health or substance abuse.
And as I said earlier, with Pinnacle Recovery, where I went, it's 18 and above. What are the ages for LifeLine?
14 to 17. We are licensed for 13, but we usually have a little bit older of a milieu, and we don't want to mix a 13-year-old with a bunch of 17-year-olds. We just feel like there might be a little bit more of an exposure there. So we'd like to protect that.
Yeah, and that's for parents listening. If you're looking at programs right now, that's what she just mentioned, the milieu or the environment that the kids are in and who's mixing with who. That's definitely something to assess. I would be concerned about the average 13-year-old and 17-year-old who are struggling being together. What would you say? I think parents often want to know, like, it's a residential treatment program, and a hospital's kind of a shorter stay, 5 to 10 days, usually not a whole lot longer than that. What about LifeLine? What would people expect for length of stay?
So we don't do like a contracted length of stay, so it just depends on the child and what their needs are. But on average, 2 to 3 months in residential. That's when they live with us.
Yeah, and what would be the longest type? Not the record, but what would be an average really long time? Do people stay a year?
When I was in the program, it used to be so. When I was in the program, it was private pay. Most programs were. Insurance wouldn't cover for things like this. Now we are a network with most major insurances. So because insurance is involved, we sometimes don't get a long enough stay that maybe a kid needs. But we do scholarship kids if they need longer. We have done it many times.
That's one of the downsides of working with insurance.
I know.
The upside.
One of them?
Yeah, it's only one. Well, obviously insurance allows access sometimes to things that we couldn't afford otherwise, but it always shortens. They really restrain what the clinicians can do, and so I'm sure that's a bit of a struggle.
It is, yeah.
So what are some of the addictions or problems that you see some of your clients coming to you with?
It ranges, but a lot of our kids have behavioral issues, aren't going to school or failing all their classes. We see kids that have major depression, anxiety. We get kids from the hospitals, behavioral hospitals, for suicide attempts. Maybe they are there for, drug use. We see that a lot. Self-harming, a range of things. The most common things we see are substance abuse or high mental health, like maybe suicide attempts or self-harming.
Do you have, I know a lot of parents would say they struggle with what's called oppositional and defiant behavior or conduct disorder, which is breaking laws. And do you have kids in there struggling with those things as well?
Yeah, we do see that a lot too as well. Yeah.
So when parents call, because they're probably, it sounds like your parents, when they were researching places to help you, they toured a couple facilities. If parents were to call you, what kind of questions do you ask? Because I think parents were like, I don't know where to turn, and this is, am I overreacting? Am I underreacting? Well, I don't know where to turn. What is the process like to have an evaluation?
So we do an assessment, and it's the same assessment. It's a little questionnaire kind of that we ask the same questions to every parent, but we just get as much detail as we can. So some of the things we ask are, what are all the behaviors that they've been, showing? Are they going to school? Have they ever talked about wanting to end their life or given an indication that they have suicidal ideation? Or have you ever noticed any self-harming scars on their arms? Are you aware of any substances they're using? Are they sexually active? these are all the things that are on our questionnaire. We also ask about like what prior, treatment they've done. If they've ever tried outpatient, day treatment, if they've ever their child's ever been to a hospital and why they were there. Things like that. Just as much background as we can get to make sure that they, do fit the criteria for residential and that we are the right program for them. We go around and visit other residential treatment centers and other day treatments and get very familiar. So if we aren't the right fit, we actually have options for the families. So we're always happy to talk to any family, whether it's a good fit or not.